Before Phonics opened this year, Fårup Sommerland's standout attraction was a Gerstlauer launch coaster called Lynet. And I guess dumb American mouth strikes again because I can't pronounce whatever this is. So anyway, Lynet stands 65 feet tall. That's on the top hat that it has, reaches 49 miles per hour on a rolling launch, and it has two inversions, which is a 0G roll and a corkscrew. This ride's located at the back of the park. I actually really have a hard time finding this ride. It's kind of back there with a lot of the family coasters. It's pretty hard to find, but there's signs everywhere around this park. So it's kind of in its own dedicated entrance plaza. It looks really nice around there. There's another flat ride right next to it. It has a sign up on the queue, and I really like the presentation of this ride. You can kind of see it from around the area. It's fun to film, it's fun to watch, and it's fun to ride. That brings me into the main problem I have with this ride, which are the restraints. This utilizes the over-the-shoulder Gerstlauer old-school restraints. I don't know if they still use them. This is the only Gerstlauer I've been on. But these are really bulky. I'm kind of a taller guy. I'm not sure if this would be the same if you're maybe shorter, but they're really tough on the shoulders because they come over it and they're really tight there, and also on kind of the waist area. I found that whenever there was a moment of airtime, which this ride has a lot of, or hang time, you kind of fall into that restraint or you get ejected up into it, which, although it's fun to have those forces, it does hurt a little bit. And this is kind of accentuated when the ride rattles around because Lynet does have a slight rattle. It's not super rough, but it's definitely noticeable in some parts of the ride, most notably the helix off of the second mid-course. So anyway, even though the restraints are pretty bad, I do think this has a great layout, so let's jump into that. Oh yeah, one thing I wanted to add before we analyze the layout is this queue is actually pretty dark. It's really hard to see anything, and I tripped twice. So yeah, just be on the lookout for that. So you take a small drop out of the station and head into this rolling launch. Accelerates to 49.7 miles per hour in 2 seconds. This is actually a pretty punchy launch. It's an LSM launch, but Gerstlauer really does these launches well from what I've heard. Again, this is the only one I've experienced, but it's short, but it's punchy. It's got a really nice kick to it, even though it doesn't reach particularly fast speed. I felt like it had a really good kick to it. You then head into this top hat, which acts as a turnaround. You twist up so that at the apex you're facing 90 degrees away, and then you twist down to head back in the same direction you're coming from. I really like this element. It takes it at a really fast pace, but surprisingly there's not too much airtime going over the top of it. There's still a little pop, but like I mentioned earlier with those restraints, it's kind of hard to enjoy it. Although this really is a good element. It's kind of intense when you're going up, and then at the top you get airtime, and then coming back down it's intense in the valley. After that, you go into a camelback, which I really like. It's one of the best moments on the ride. It's kind of weirdly profiled. It's pretty sharp at the top, but I think that works in the element's favor. You get a really good sustained ejector airtime pop, but like I mentioned, with those restraints, you kind of fly into them. Next, you head up into this mid-course, and there's actually another really good pop of airtime as you're going into this. This ride is kind of a lot of airtime. It's mostly in the first half, but it's some really good ejector. If you're in the front row or this middle row, you get a brief pop right as you're heading into this element, and it's pretty powerful. There's two mid-course brake runs on this ride, but neither of them really slow the train down that much, and they both have really good airtime heading into and sometimes out of them, but it twists out of them, so no. It's kind of like Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket, where I don't really mind that the brake runs are there, even though they do hurt the pacing, because there's airtime going into and out of it. It kind of acts as a normal airtime hill. After the first mid-course, you turn off of it and head into a 0G roll. This is a really nice element, but again, I sound like a broken record here. It's the restraints. There's a little bit of hang time and you kind of fall into it, but eventually that starts not to bother you. I mean, you can nitpick around this, but overall it really is a fun ride, even though the restraints do try their best to ruin it. Anyway, this is a fun element. You then head into an overbank, which really doesn't do much, and then into this corkscrew, which I really enjoyed. Like I said, there's a lot of hang time, especially on this element. If you try to ignore the restraints, you'll end up having a great time on this element in particular. It's definitely the better out of the two inversions on the ride, and probably one of the best elements. I really like this. Next is the second mid-course, and I feel like every part after this definitely isn't as good as the parts that came before it. This doesn't really slow you down, but after that you turn off, there's a helix. It's pretty intense, but it does shimmy a lot. Then you have kind of this weird transition into the brakes. Felt like after this second mid-course it kind of could have ended there. But anyway, it's good to have an extra section of track. Then you pop into the brakes, and that ends the ride. So overall, I really liked Lynet. I think it has a great layout. It's a really fun ride, especially with that launch and a couple of the star elements, like I mentioned, the top hat, the airtime hill, the corkscrew. But the one thing that really hinders this ride, like I mentioned, is the restraints. They're bulky. But like I said, if you're shorter, I don't think they'll bother you as much as they bothered me. It doesn't completely ruin the ride, it's just something that hinders it. Overall, I really, really like this ride. And so I will give it a 7.5 out of 10.